So now let's talk about the anatomy of a curl. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to create an individual curl and show how I use those same strategies with the strand of hair to create the values. So when you're creating curls, you know, if I was working on an individual curl, it's really going to kind of shift back and forth and curl into itself. Let me get the shape down first, and then I'll kind of talk about how I lay it out. So a curl kind of twists back and forth through space. So, you know, they move left to right, kind of twisting back and forth with itself. It's still going to have those values and those chunks. So like I did before, starting with my shadows in these corners, that's how I'm going to build up the form of this curl. And then there's this overlap that's happening here. So I'm gonna really start to develop shadows from this overlap and from where the curl kind of starts. The parts that usually have a highlight are gonna be this like middle section of the curl. That's where the light starts to catch it. So I'm gonna go through and use the same strategies that I did for the straight hair, but just use it in a tinier sense in this individual strand, and then we'll talk about drawing curls on a face. So you can see, even as I'm developing this curl here, I really have to think about where my line is starting. That is becoming more and more important. So when I'm doing this kind of undercurve, I have my pencil always starting in the shadows, like I said, and allowing your pencil to just freely kind of move into the movement. So look at where the curl is moving in the image that you're looking at, and twist your paper so that it's in the right direction to make your hand allow yourself to freely do it. Sometimes what I'll do if I'm working on a portrait and I'm trying to really get my hand to be more free, I'll work in my sketchbook just a little bit to like practice that movement. And once I get it down, then I can go back to the page and say, okay, that's how I'm doing this one. And obviously, you know, sometimes your hand twists and turns, but like I said, those little imperfections exist in nature. So it makes your work look a little bit more natural as you're going through and developing it. So just like with when we did cross contour, where you start that line, that first beginning curve becomes really, really important when you're working with hair, especially with curls. So when we're looking at how curls lay naturally on a face, because you might say, oh my gosh, there's no way that I can do this over and over again on a drawing. And I totally understand that. I've seen some amazing, very detailed curl drawings. And it's really up to the artist how much they want to define each of those curls. And also it depends on your image too. Are each of the curls defined? What I always tell my students is to look at your image. Now, obviously this is an image of a drawing, but look at your image and see, you're probably not gonna see a defined curl everywhere. There are gonna be some areas that are kind of just like mixed with like shadows, like we don't really see too many definitions or highlights in the curls as they are like closer to the neck or further back. But maybe you'll see a more defined curl at the top, or a few on the sides. So what I always say is, you know, define a couple throughout and then use values to your advantage. Maybe create some more shadows in some areas, just some like kind of loose line work in some areas, And instead of like thinking about really defining each one, some of them can be much more loose as you are developing the hair. So it's really much more on an individual basis, the image that you're creating, but really think about picking and choosing maybe some sections closer to the face to really define some curls, and then use, like I said, shadows and some line work to kind of get some of the stuff in the back to kind of push a little further back. So you don't have to define every single one if you don't want to. So I'm just going to go through and add some of the curls next to here on a face. So this is kind of a faster, smaller sketch, but it gives you the idea how you can use your pen marks and kind of black out where the little chunks are, and then start to define and develop certain parts more than others. How to use shadows and line work to kind of blend in where you don't want to spend so much time pulling out individual values. But you could see how the same technique I used for this individual curl can be used when drawing a bigger face. So that's just a fast idea. Like I said, everything with drawing really is dependent on the actual image that you're using and a individual's unique style.